if you can get ahead of it and catch an emotion quickly, it won't full on overtake you. That's the coolest thing is if you catch fear and like, that's fear. I know why. And you can do that. You can actually start to walk that fear back and then learn to like let go of that and release that. I'm never forget, like the fear is there because we've conditioned our nervous system improperly. There's actually not a threat most of the time in front of us. It's an improper response from our nervous system. We just need to stop and go, I think I know why. I've been so hard on myself in the past. I've went to disappointment so much. My brain's afraid of this thing because it doesn't want to feel like it's not enough. But you know what? We don't do that anymore, right? We have a new way of doing things. It's time to let go of this fear so we can be who we're meant to be. Like, I just don't believe fear 99.999% of the time is accurate. It's not. And so we're really just trying to be more reasonable, realistic. And so but your nervous system is not just going to walk off if you've had 10 years of like behavior and conditioning from parents and coaches telling you're a disappointment. Like, you're going to have to like change the patterns of not going to disappointment. And then you're going to have to let your brain know in real time, we don't need this anymore. I know why you have it, but we don't need it.
Hey there, welcome back to Good for the Hive, the podcast where I get to sit down and speak with inspiring guests to share their life lessons and take a look at the question, what is a good life? Today's guest, Coyte Cooper, is a best-selling author, a speaker, and a coach. Coyte is so enthusiastic about the clients that he coaches, and he loves his work. Coyte specializes in putting systems together to achieve high performance, personal wellness, and maximize potential. There is no two ways about it. This is the Habit episode. We talk all about Coyte's systems that he's so enthusiastic about. We take a look at the way you can almost trick your brain into loving a habit before you've even started. And we take a look at the silent role that fear and pain play in our daily lives. If you enjoyed the episode, please do give it a like and share. And if you're new around here, do subscribe. All the new likes and subs help us to continue to grow and attract inspiring guests just like Coyte. Let's jump into the episode. Coyte Cooper, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to be here and I appreciate you having me.
Good stuff. I'm so excited for this podcast for many, many different reasons. Researching you, as I always do, I like to stalk the guests fully before they come on and have a good chat. And some of the things that you talk about in previous interviews that I found and the work that you're doing now, I feel like it leaks into a little bit of stoicism. You talk about meditation, you talk about habit formation. It's all really, really interesting things that I love talking about. So I just can't wait to get into this one. But let's start where we start all of our podcasts and ask you, what is a good life to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a challenging question. I think as I look back, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said something probably related to like externally striving and achieving at a high level. But man, to me, living a good life is, getting up, living with a high level of purpose, having things that you're really excited and passionate to pursue. And I think, it's not only that, but it's feeling good living in our bodies. I think we place very little, any emphasis on that. Like, how do we feel living our days? Do we feel calm or do we feel excited? Like, we don't place any thought to that. And that's what meditation actually taught me is like, when I started to excel with it, if we call it excelling, I started to realize there was a quietness on the inside of me. And I thought at that moment, oh my gosh, like I've had anxiety my whole life. And to me, like living a good life doesn't mean eliminating all of that, but it does mean taking control of how we focus, how we go about our days. So we're actually enjoying our days, like fully present for our days. And so for me, it's probably a combination of where I'm doing things that are purposeful for me, spending time with my family, being in nature as much as possible. But I think just feeling good, like we're really truly enjoying the life we're living. That's my highest standard is like, can I learn to love my life? Can I show up and do that? So I think that's to me what it means to live a good life is to love what we're doing and being purposeful and doing things that we really care about.
I really like the way that you put that. And just to pick up on one of the words that you use, purpose. Mm-hmm. The purpose that you have now, obviously it will have changed over the years and this will be your purpose right now. How did you come across your current purpose? How did you know that's the one, that's what I want to strive for, that's what I want to get better at, that's what I want to dedicate really massive amounts of effort to doing?
It'd be optimal if I could tell you like I just knew my whole life, but I think there's themes in life. I think we go through life and as we move forward, if we're growing, we start to realize things about ourselves. And the thing I initially started to realize was like, I really enjoy working with people. Like I remember even in high school, I used to love working with younger kids in wrestling just to see if I could help them excel and advance. And then I moved forward and, some of my purpose came because I had some really big challenges come into my life. Like I was probably too externally focused, which made it harder for me to find my purpose. But I had a big defining moment where I was a college professor and, kind of out of nowhere, I lost my job. I got denied tenure, and it was a very, very challenging moment for me, and I was feeling, well, we might get at some of this. I was feeling a lot of different emotions, which I did what we normally do. I tucked them and pushed them down and tried to move forward. And that didn't work. But in the middle of that, I think I started to realize I don't really have the answers right now. Like there was a pattern to my life. I was looking outward, I was striving, and then I wouldn't be. Something would happen and I would feel like I wasn't good enough and I would struggle. And I think this time it was big enough and life altering enough that I finally started to realize I need to go inward and find some different answers. And as I went inward, I think I started to learn more about what really mattered to me, like what was the most important to me. And I started to really work at things like I wanted to be more about serving than, my ego and making sure that I'm having people pat me on the back. And, as I went inward, I started to realize I really love coaching. I have a journey here that I don't even know how it's come upon me, but it's come upon me and it's changed my life. And I started to realize I love teaching. I love this message. And then you start pouring into coaching and you realize the more you do it the right way, the more rewarding it is and the more you're rewarded from it. And, I just think as you start to get to know yourself, you start to know the things that really bring you joy. And I think the more you can be authentic to that, I think that's more of what your purpose is. And, mine wasn't, I didn't plan it out. It's just, I had life experiences and I think I paid attention and I adapted, and maybe there's some guidance to that, but you start to realize you arrive at a spot where you just truly love what you do. Like you just truly love working with people in that capacity. And it not only aligns like where you're interested in it, I think it aligns with some of your gifts and your skill sets. And I think when those pieces start to come together, you just know it. You show up and you know that this is the thing you should be doing. I have one of my coaching clients who's a friend, a coach, and he loves to ask me this question. He says, Coyte, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? And I'm like, I'm not doing anything else. Like, this is the thing I'm supposed to do. Like, I know it, like through experience is what I'm supposed to. He's like, well, and I finally will say, find something with teaching or coaching, but I this is what I'm meant to be doing right now. I really feel that. And it's, it when you wake up and you just feel such energy. And I always talk about like, it's almost like you imagine a magnet, right? And a lot of times in life, if you turn a magnet one way, it pulls towards each other, right? Like strongly pulls towards each other. Most people know if we turn them the other way, they resist each other. And I think before, because it wasn't the right model for me, I was trying to push my way in to make it work. And there was always that tension. But since I've went inward and I've figured out what really matters to me and I've created the right system around it, I feel pulled towards my work and the things that I do on a daily basis. And I think you have to have purpose and then you have to go about it the right way. But I feel pulled. That's the best way I can describe it. And it's just been a journey to find it. But once you find it, it's really so rewarding.
It's really interesting the way you phrase that. One of my previous guests, Stephen Short, was a career guidance expert, let's call him. Mm-hmm. He really was. And he broke down something that I'd never really thought too much about. So he said, like, for example, any career, so you're good with numbers. So you could be an accountant, you could be in charge of all the finances for a huge building, or you could just like the back office stuff. But it's having that combination of your skills, your personality, and what you're good at, that will actually design where you go within working with numbers. You're meant to work with numbers, you're good with numbers, it's natural. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean you have to be an accountant just because numbers and accountancy go hand in hand. You could aim higher than that, you could aim lower, and you'll find your right level. When it comes to you and the being a professor, at the time, did you think you loved that and you'd found your thing? Because you found that, let's call it success, you found that quite early on and you were quite young. I don't know what the average age that professors get tenure, but it seemed like you were super high achieving. But potentially, if you weren't loving it, were you high achieving, but just in the wrong field for you? Or at the time, did you just love it and you think, no, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life?
Well, I definitely think I thought that I loved it and I thought I'd be doing it for good. But I think in the middle of it, what I now know is like, there was a part of that was pretty heavily externally driven, right? Publish at this rate, get this type of feedback. That was a huge part of the equation, which made I was like a roller coaster, by the way, But I think, as I went through it, I realized there were signs, right? I would say I loved it, but I would sort of dread parts of it, right? And I think some of that was just my mindset, and that was wrong. But I had that, and there were these signs, like I just knew this is part of what I knew too, that the tenure gave me no choice, the denied tenure. But when I was in my roles, like I just remember like there were just these moments where I could just tell, like, so I would do these activities in class where it was on values and goals. And I love that with my students. And I could just see it changing their lives. And like someone would set goals to, certain things they wanted to do, and they would start to do that. The values would start to teach them about who they wanted to be. And you could just tell it would resonate with them. But I could only spend a certain amount of time before somebody would say, Coyte, get back to teaching marketing, get back to teaching people how to make money. And I think I just learned this about myself. There's nothing wrong if done right with money, and you can have that, you can enjoy that. But I knew I wasn't passionate about helping these athletic departments, 150 million make 200. That just, somebody might love that, but I started to realize that's not what it is. Now, I was fortunate. This sounds crazy, but I was fortunate that universe, or whatever you want to call it, took and gave me a situation where I had to reflect. I had to think. I lost my job. There was no other option. Maybe other people aren't fortunate enough when they're going towards their purpose to get like fired in a way where you actually have to look somewhere else. And so for me, I think there were hints and signs there that I wasn't paying attention to, but as I've gone on my journey and I've followed, it was a scary path, but I felt like it was the right path. As I followed it and learned, I was able to look back and go, gosh, like, thank goodness that didn't work out. That wasn't my right fit. One of the biggest things in hindsight, I had a professor one time, like a friend, called like acquaintance. I went and they asked me to give this presentation. Right. It was on personal branding and how to represent yourself. And I was passionate about that at the time. And I went and did something where some of the professors in that were there. And one of the women came up to me. She goes, she's like, I didn't know that was you. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, the energy, the way you did that. She said, I didn't know that was you. And I remember thinking, I'm not fully being myself in this environment even. And I think academia is very critical. Don't step out of line. Or you can have problems. And I think I was just following within the lines. And I don't think I was being authentic to who I was in pockets I was with students, but like with professors and that I wasn't. And I think that's a big thing too. Like you have to be able to find something where you can be yourself. Because if you can't be yourself, you're not going to enjoy it. Like we can't be adjusting who we are all the time and be fulfilled and happy. That's like betraying who we are and our gifts and who we're supposed to be. So I think as I look back, I'm like, gosh, there were all these signs. It was just going on the journey where I truly realized, wow, like that wasn't the right fit for me. I was blessed to have a very big interrupt in my life that caused me to look somewhere else. And such a blessing because, man, I've learned things now. It's like just so much purpose in what I do on a day-to-day basis.
It feels like the early success that you had was almost like a double-edged sword, and it kept you in that lane for longer than you needed to be. And had something gone wrong earlier, or like, you can almost be unconscious with it and like, well, I'm really good at this because I'm getting, like you say, I'm getting all that external feedback to say this is the right place. I'm in the right place. I'm doing the right things. I'm where I'm meant to be. And then, like you say, well, you call it an interrupt, pretty major interrupt.
Yeah, that's pretty big life and pattern interrupt. And and I even had some earlier than that. My college athletic career didn't go the way I wanted. I had some success, and so that's what hurt me is I had some success, but it wasn't near what I wanted it to be. It was disappointment. And I think that's what I finally started to realize. It was like a mind-boggling moment when I realized my approach is wrong. The way I've been taught is wrong. Like I'm expecting perfection when I don't meet it. I fall into a pattern of feeling like I'm a disappointment. It dawned on me that I also wasn't being fair to myself. The model was going to lead to disappointment. It was going to lead to fear. And that's the biggest thing I've learned now is like, we can actually take something we love and we can goof it up if the model around it, the operating system around it is wrong. And so I don't think I was in the right area, but I was also looking too much externally. When I wasn't meeting external standards, I was immediately disappointed in myself and following into that. And it dawned on me as I went on this new journey that I'm like, oh my goodness, like as a professor it was wrong. As an athlete it was wrong. I was never going to love the thing in front of me because I was disappointed too often. And we place a lot of pride in that. Oh, sit in that pain, soak it up, take it and use it as your energy source. And now I look at it, I'm like, why would we do that? There's a way to do this where you love it with passion. Why do we have to insert pain into it? So that was part of my lesson too, is like looking back and realizing part of the reason I had ended up in these situations is I didn't have a model that was like fair to my brain and my nervous system. Like I was going to develop anxiousness around it. But I do think I definitely did have these interrupts though that caused me to go on a different journey. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't be where you are today without it. No way.
You'd
probably be hating your job, not hating, but you wouldn't be comfortable. You wouldn't be authentic. You'd be faking it to a level that is not sustainable. potentially.
You hit it on the nose. My wife and I know it. We would still be in that job. I would still be talking about how someday I might go out and become an author, coach, and speaker, because I did know that that was something I thought I might do someday. Just someday would have just got keep pushed back. It would have been comfortable. I would have kept doing a job that I liked, but I didn't love. And this sped up that path. And so, yeah, you're right. I would have settled in there and been comfortable. We probably would have had another kid and just settled in a normal life, and it would have been good, but I wouldn't have learned what I've learned now.
No, fascinating. Well, let's pick into some of that now. One of the things I found online was your Hilliard TED Talk or TEDx. And it was just so interesting. So you talk about the adversity and your pattern interrupt, your life interrupt at such a crucial point. Was it 34? No, what age were you when you had this?
It would have been right around that age. Yeah, 34 years old.
And you talk so interestingly. You bring in perspective, choice, and the Viktor Frankl book, which I've read because I'm obsessed with Stoicism, but I don't think I think I need to read it again. I don't think it's really sunk in, the message there. I vaguely understand it, but I want to talk about it a bit more.
Yeah.
So based on that, what was your biggest lesson, and how did you get from such a low point in your life and not understanding what to do to being able to step back, reframe it, look at it afresh, and see it actually as a massive, it's not an obstacle anymore, it is actually the way that I'm going to do, and flip the script on this situation?
Yeah. I think at the time I didn't do it initially. I think what I did is what we normally do. We have this disappointment, and anybody who's taught to be positive, there are people more evolved than I was, but this is the way I handled it. I think I was feeling embarrassed. I think there was fear. I think there was anger. There was a lot of this, and I just kind of tucked it. And I told people like, hey, everything happens for a reason. It'll all be good. And that might've been true, but there was a lot going on. But my biggest shift came, I remember I was sitting at home. I knew I wasn't doing the way I wanted to be doing. And I always tell audiences, man, I wish I could tell you I was doing something crazy profound, like, reading a book on Stoicism, like reading like books on that. But I was like scrolling on Facebook is what I was doing. And I got lucky because that day, nowadays it's way more cluttered. But that day there was this video from Robin Sharma. Robin Sharma is a really neat guy who does this really cool work, and similar but different. But like, he was talking about a message with his dad, and he was like, my dad always told me, like, Robin, like skip meals, but like never skip reading. He said, like, read from people, fill your brain, like just the ability to be more positive. And he was combining this with saying, hey, like, if you go rise every morning and join the early risers club, and he was proposing 5 a.m. He said, it will change your life. And I'm like, I'm not doing that great. I don't love where I'm at. But one thing I am is I'm a little bit kind of stubborn. I'll pick something and I'll go at it. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go at this thing. And so I started to wake up, and one of the very early books was Viktor Frankl's book. And I'll come back to that in just a second. But so I tell people I started to read, I got up early, and I said I noticed two things. Number one, I was not adjusted to 5 a.m. That was not my thing at the time. And so at the time I had young kids. I would go to work, do my work, and then I'd come home and I would be like on the rug playing with my kids, like, blocks and stuff like that. And I would just fall asleep on the rug. And I tell her I have the sweetest wife, but I imagine she was like, you bum, like, get up, take care of your kids. Luckily, I adjusted to that time frame, and it became this really cool space for me. The number two thing is the reading I started to notice is I started to wake up, and the first thing I did was not touching my phone, not getting in and allowing like technology to first influence my brain. As I started to fill my brain with like some of these amazing people and these ideas, I noticed my brain started to become more positive as I flooded it with it. It was super interesting. I noticed instead of going, I don't have this and that, I started to read about these people that caused me to think differently. And that was a huge step for me. And one of the early ones of those was Viktor Frankl's book. And Anson Dorrance had recommended it. He's like a 20+ time national championship coach. Like, and I interviewed him a while back, and he said, like, this is the book, like, you need to read this book. And so I picked it up and I started reading it, and it was just mind boggling to me. Here's a guy who was placed in concentration camps at a time where Hitler was treating people horribly, horrifically. And a big chunk of his family was put into these camps, and he lost a big chunk of them, as far as the research I've done. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I'm sitting here going, like, I can't imagine like somebody taking my kids and my wife and taking their life away for no good reason. I would have been so angry. Like, I don't know what I would have done with that. Or if I wasn't angry, I'd have been so sad, like, to lose them. And I thought, like, I don't know if I would have got out of that. I don't know how he got out of that, but he had at the center of his book this idea. And this is, I think, what makes him unique is like things in life happen. There's hard things that happen. Your greatest power as a human being is your ability to choose the way you respond to any situation in life. I tell people, listen, that could have came from my wife, my mom, my dad, a friend. I would have been like, no, because I was struggling at that time. But because it came from a spot where I'm like, oh my gosh, like he faced something so mind-bogglingly difficult that he might have felt those things, but he moved through and he set up like suicide watch camps to give people hope. Because he had that idea, like, listen, you can always choose your response. And he was like modeling that at a high level. And he got out and he wrote this book, and last it's 50, 60 million people. And I thought, oh my gosh, like here's a guy who's faced that. And he turned it into this gift for humankind. And so for me, it was like, oh my gosh, like if he could do that, surely I can do something with this. And so that's when I started to like wake up every morning and I had this gratitude practice. I realized, because my thought was like, man, like I may have lost my job, but like I still have these kids who love me. They don't give a rip if I lost my job. They just want to play dinosaurs, right? I still have these amazing kids. And I may have lost my job, but I live in a place where I can go out and I can do something else. I've got the skill sets. And I started to realize like, man, there's already these blessings in my life. And I need to start reminding myself, I have good things in my life right now. And that elevated my emotional state, that helped me start to look for better. I needed that. I wouldn't have found better if I didn't start looking for better. But one of the most impactful rituals I've ever done is I took my 3 top areas and I do the gratitude. And then I take my biggest challenge. I learned this from Viktor Frankl. I took my biggest challenge and I said, what could I be grateful for? I call this a 3x1 bless bank. And the one is like, when I first started asking it, my brain's like, nothing, dummy. You lost your job. There's nothing good about it, because brains like to do that sometimes when we're more trained to be more negative in nature and our brains have a slant towards negative. But I kept going, no, I refused that answer. I kept going, what could I be grateful for? And I'm like, well, maybe going out, becoming an author, coach, speaker. But my brain was afraid. So I was like, no, that can't be it. But I kept going. And finally, I'm like, that's it. That's the thing. Like this is the gift. I have a chance to go do something that I truly care about. And then I started to do that. And then I had like evidence, like, oh my gosh, like this can work. It is working. And it taught me, like in the middle of life's like biggest challenges, you can have these like really remarkable shifts. And so for me, it was starting to dig into these habits and rituals. And it was the reference point of Viktor Frankl, where I realized that I had more power over what was going on in my life than I realized. Like I couldn't control the external right now, but I could control the response. And that caused me to embark on the right habits. And when you read a lot, you start to learn a lot of really cool strategies. And then you start to realize you have other challenges you needed to dig into. And that was just part of my journey, was that growth and waking up early, rising. That was a huge part of creating like a positive shift.
So seeing as you mentioned it so early, the habits, you've listed off a couple there. What I'm quite interested in, because there's quite a few habits that come and go. And they seem good, but you just can't keep them up and you don't keep them going. Have you maintained all of those habits that you started from that day and you've built upon them? Or have some fed into, some have just been dismissed because they just weren't working for you? So the waking up early, the gratitudes,
Yeah. So really good question. Yeah. Yes, they have. Like I don't know the exact number. I'd have to pull it up, but it's probably to the tune of like 3,000, almost 3,000 days of like gratitude, like to that number. And so like every day waking up, doing it. But I think it was just the impact that it had on my life. But I don't think that I would have maintained that. So there's the initial part I started with from pain, right? I was struggling. So I invested in these habits and I got momentum. If I wouldn't have created a more positive shift in my habits, I would have not been able to do that. So we can get to that probably in just a second, because I believe the habits are important, but how you go about habits is equally important. But yes, I have. And I think it was just because number one, they started from pain, but then I started to realize, oh my gosh, like these are helping me become like a different person. This is crazy. Like and I really love the person I'm becoming from them. And I think I wasn't as intentional as I am now, but I started to notice like, wow, like I'm becoming more calm. I'm becoming more proactive. I'm becoming better. And I like that. I love the feel. And, and I always love, Tony Robbins always talks about that. Like, man, like humans love growth. We are wired to grow. And so when you start to grow, you start to go, oh, I kind of like this. And so for me, it was started from there. And I think it made such a profound impact. There was so much evidence that I continued. And then, especially with starting with meditation, that was later. And I didn't have that level. I did not have that level of consistency at first. And that's where it caused me to kind of dig in and realize that like I was driving too much of what I was doing from pain, a place of pain. And so when I started to realize the psychology behind habits, that's a part of why my meditation is 4.5 years straight. It's because I've learned to love my habits. Like I love them. But I don't believe we do that intentionally. So I think I've had some that because of what they meant to me, they've continued, I've adapted and evolved. But some of the newer ones, I've had to be super intentional about positioning them right, so I would be consistent with it. But that's one of the coolest things I teach now that I think people are most intrigued by is how to go about habits in a way that teaches your brain to love them. Not some grit grind thing, like love because of their purpose and what they do for you in your life and how you celebrate them and create like a positive psychology around them. That's one of the coolest things that has allowed me to be really consistent now.
And do you prefer you call them rituals briefly? Do you see them as rituals rather than habits? And it's more than just something you do. It's actually who you are and
Yes.
a reflection of who you are.
I think so. Yes. And because I've thought about that a lot. Like, when you're initially starting, habits seem to be the gold standard, right? And this will help you understand kind of how I've come about the things that I do. I remember when I first started with meditation, I was reading, I think, Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, and he was interviewing these really cool people. And he kept asking, like, what's your most impactful habit? And people just kept saying meditation, transcendental meditation, like all these forms of meditation. I'm like, I should probably be doing this. Like, these people are all doing, I'm gonna get it. And at the time I was that, kind of this, my athlete side was like, all right, I'm going to go crush this meditation. I had no idea. Meditation is not about crushing anything. It's not that at all. And so, but I was like, I'm going to go do it. And I didn't set it up. I was just like, other people are doing it. I should probably do it too. I mean, you might read this flag right up front. That's not a whole lot of purpose. That's something you should. Brain doesn't love should when you're busy. So I'll get back to that. But I just started to do it. I started to show up every day. And it was interesting because it was more difficult than I thought. Like my mind was busier than I thought. I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, but I kept going. And this was super fascinating to me because I had heard like, oh, habits, people say, oh, 21 days. Some people say 28 days. Some people say 66 days. The longest that I heard at the time I was reading was 66. So I'm like, all right, I'm about to go do 66. I'll get past 66. It will become second nature and I'll be good. And so I started to do it. And I even got in like a month in, a little bit more probably. And I had a breakthrough. And it was such a cool experience. It's what you hear about in meditation sometimes, where all of a sudden your body, you got your breathing dialed in, your body's calm, your mind clears out. And I know now I was getting to a higher state. And it was this amazing stillness that I'd never experienced. It was mind boggling to me. And I went through and I got done. I knew two things from that moment. I'm like, one, I want to experience more of this. Number one. Number two, I think I've referenced this earlier. I've had anxiety my whole life. That's the moment I'm like, oh my gosh, this calmness has taught me, like, I've kind of been like, ooh, like on edge a lot of my life. And so what's interesting though, is I had these mind boggling breakthroughs. I was not able to replicate that day, like over and over. I've since gotten better at like experiencing more of that state, but I kept moving forward. My mind got quieter. I got better. And then an interesting thing happened. I got to 66 days. I passed it by a few, say day 70. And I don't remember what was going on in my life, but I just stopped. I just didn't meditate. And then I was frustrated with myself. I'm like, what the heck? Like, why in the world did I stop? What the heck? And I got negative. And then I noticed my brain was like, nope. How about we be done with this habit? And so usually I would have doubled down on myself and said, no, like get your butt back in there like we do in sport and go do it. But this time I was like, no, like, I don't know why, but I was like, I'm going to be curious this time. I need to figure out what's going on. And again, some of Tony Robbins' works had a lot of influence on me. And I was listening to something that time, and he said, hey, and I'd heard this before, this time it hit me more. He said, the brain does things for two reasons: to avoid pain, maximize pleasure. Like it's always doing that. It's always looking. And I don't know why, but I thought, could this be it? Could this be the reason why, like, I'm now falling short on my habits? And I started to look closer, and I started to look from the lens of like, what did I do to add pain? Did I do anything to add pleasure? And I quickly realized I didn't do anything to drive pleasure. None. I was just like, I'm going to do it because other people do it. It's not a great reason. It's not a highly purposeful reason. And so I did that. I didn't ever praise myself. Not once. Not once did I say, good job for showing up today to be better. Not once did I acknowledge the growth that I was making. And then on top of all that, my brain was literally just waiting for the one time that I made a mistake, because that's the way I'd learned. And when I made a mistake, I got frustrated. All I had done from the get-go is adding pain. If you don't position a habit and you're busy, a habit is pain to your brain. And then you come along, you don't praise it all. You expect perfection. Perfection is actually pain for your brain, because your brain knows that we're not capable of doing that. And so that's pain. And then you come along and you beat yourself up. I went 70 days straight of a world-class, life-altering habit. And I didn't give myself credit once. And all I did was criticize myself at day 70. It's no wonder that my brain was like, how about no on this habit? Now, at that moment, I started to realize, what if I changed the equation? Like, what if I went inward and I became about how do I associate pleasure around this world-class life-altering habit? What if I was intentional about making it highly enjoyable and eliminating the pain in my process? And that's when I started to realize there's key elements to this, right? And I call this the 3P free formula now. If you want to love a habit and feel free and have a flow to it, like having that magnet where you're pulled towards it, I call it pain pleasure ratio, right? Everything in life in front of you has a pain pleasure ratio. Most of the time, we associate more pain with it. So, I procrastinate. I would say, you probably don't. You've probably just associated more pain with this. So your brain's like, how about no? My whole goal became, how do we drive pleasure, minimize pain, see what happens? I just treated myself as a guinea pig. I'm like, hey, let's see what happens. We got nothing to lose. Like, let's just try it. And so I realized there's components. Like, number one is priming. The first P is priming. I tell my clients, never start a habit until you know exactly why. I could call priming purpose too, but it's prime it by going through and saying, what are the benefits? What are the upsides? And with meditation, it's like, man, like world-class ability to focus, opportunity to get control of my nervous system, lower my nerves, lower my fear, drive my immune system. Like you can go down and you can find a laundry list of things that will change your life from meditation. I didn't mail this in. I wrote it down. I wrote down all the things. And it was more than just the basic element of what it was, like minimize stress. I was more like, the ability to like show up with incredible energy, the ability to love what I do. I started to connect those things. And then I'll do this. I'll do this until my brain's like, oh my gosh, how cool is this? Like, why would we not do this? This will change our life. Check it out. And it's like 5 to 10 minutes a day. It doesn't make sense not to do it. That's pleasure. So brain starts to go, okay, like a magnet, let's go check this thing out. Now that's a critical component. Don't start until you have an intrigue, an interest. People often screw this up. They'll go New Year's resolutions. And I always say their problem is they're setting goals when they're drunk, which is not a good idea. But then they come along and they're like, okay, this is the year. I'm going to get in such good shape. That's okay. I don't mind that. Like, right. You could even go good shape so I can be a great father, feel good. But instead they go, oh, but I got to go on a diet. And your brain is sitting and listening going, how about we won't be going on a diet? That's not happening because diet is like pain to the brain. People don't even realize you're backing into a habit. And so we have to get that priming right. So your brain says, yes, please, let's move forward. Then the second P is plan. We often make the mistake of going, okay, this meditation thing, some of these world-class people do it 30 minutes. I'm about to do it for 30 minutes. I'm like, you don't want to meditate for 30 minutes when you first start. You don't have the skill set. It'll be 28 minutes of pain to your brain. It's like somebody out of shape going, they're so out of shape, they can't do anything, going to CrossFit right off the bat. Like, that's not a good idea. You won't walk for 2 weeks. And your brain the whole time will be going, I do not like this. But the thing is, we pride ourselves on as much as possible, as soon as possible, instead of going, there's a book by BJ Fogg called Tiny Habits, where he says, just start a little bit, just a baby amount, enough for you to follow through, find some enjoyment, learn your skill set around it. And that's what I believe in too. Is like with meditation, instead of that, max 5 minutes, find something that you can enjoy, that you can just follow, where you can find some success with it, build some momentum, because it's key that you take your plan and you look at it not like, how can I go as quickly as possible? How can I enjoy it as much as possible? How can I find this? And so it's like finding times that make sense versus like jamming them into the morning when you're not sleeping the night before. That's a bad idea. So we could talk more about that, but it's about driving pleasure through the plan. But the third P is one of my favorites. And it's different, it's quirky, but I would say praise. We have to praise our progress, right? We need to get in there. We need to diminish dwell time when we miss and be curious and find solutions. But when we follow through the very first day, I tell my clients, okay, celebrate and credit is what we do. Okay, I want you to very end, whatever you do to celebrate, you clap, you flex, you nod, you smile, you arms up, whatever it is that you like to do, we want to create a physiological change in the body where we can release feel-good hormones. We're almost hacking into our brain a little bit, but we're doing it for a world-class habit. So my choice is like, I like to clap like this and flex. And that is often like, oh man, this is good, right? So that's the first part, is celebrate. The credit part is equally or more important. And it'll tie back to your priming. I tell my people, say, that's where you clap, you flex, you ooh, and you get that going. And then you go, yep, that's one step closer to you fill in the gap. Calm in big moments, present with my kids, able to have the energy I want to live the days that I want to live. Whatever most intrigues you, inspires you, you insert it there, and two things are going to happen. Number one, the feel good part. Brain is always about associations. So the brain's going to go, okay, I feel good chemicals. What caused it? It's going to go, the breath work caused it. Let's keep doing that again. That's number one. You tying it to growth is also going to reinforce that same thing, because brain loves growth. But I also say confidence is really important. Belief is really important. Psychology is really important. So when we celebrate, we go, that's a step closer to becoming this person. You're building confidence too. people often come to me and they go, I don't have great confidence. And then I follow their patterns and their habits. And when they fall short, they crush themselves. When they follow through, they don't do anything. Well, we're not going to have great confidence. But as we create the right approach, what I found is my brain started to love my habit. And when it started to love my habit, doesn't matter what my schedule is. My brain's going to find my meditation in my day now. It loves it. It knows the benefits. And the bigger thing is it doesn't associate any pain with it. It's not going, forecasting, going, we miss, he's going to crush us. It's like, nah, he'll just find a way to grow. We cool. And what's happened is my brain now with that, I've learned to love like cold immersion, which that's kind of a weird thing to learn to love, but I love cold immersion. And it's because it's highly purposeful. And I've went through the same thing. I've taught my brain to love it. Now you don't do this with something counterproductive. It's just things you think can change your life. But once you work it, it's wild what the brain will do. And how cool is it? This is the last thing I'll say around this. I tell my clients, how cool would it be if you learn to work a world-class habit in a manner where your brain loves it so much that you don't have to put any energy into it, any effort, and it will come along and serve you, make you better in all the ways that you plan, drive your energy, make your focus better. You're not putting any energy in, and now you're driving something with energy. Our energy levels are now at a net higher versus most of the time we're grit and grinding our way through everything and we're worn out, we're exhausted. This is just a different way of going about it. But it's been cool for me because I realize I love it so much that my brain will find my habits. So I'm sorry. I need to come back to your initial part of the question. So what that taught me is that because I realized this in between what you're talking about, habits not what I'm searching for. I want rituals. And then I realized rituals aren't what I'm searching for. If I do my rituals right, I'll love them and they'll become lifestyle and they'll just be a part of who I am. I see myself as a growth person. I see myself as somebody who shows up to be the best that I can. I have a lot of evidence that proves that to me. So that becomes lifestyle and who you are. Because I think that's what you were aiming at. That's the highest thing when you're like, it's just who I am. This is just what I do. And that's a really powerful thing because when your brain believes that, it will find a way to follow through on those things.
Yeah. I mean, so much to come back on you there. But literally what you've just said, it takes me back to James Clear's Atomic Habits with don't be, I'm trying to quit smoking, be, I'm a non-smoker. And it is your identity. If you embody that, it makes everything else so much easier. I've never heard someone explain positive habit formation how you just have. And it made so much sense. So you have to sell it to yourself. You're almost treating your brain as a separate entity that unfortunately we have to sell it to, first of all. That's your priming. You've got to sell it to yourself and tell it to your brain that this is going to be positive for us in the long run.
Yes.
Planning by just starting small. Like you say, like people, we've seen it 1,000 times over. Someone's right, I'm going to get fit, I'm going to eat well, and they just start a habit that's just so unsustainable. They're just eating salad and trying to go to the gym for 2 hours a day. Like you say, you're not going to be able to do it. It's just impossible. No. Don't start like that. It's just a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
And then praising yourself is something, I don't know if it's a British thing, I don't know, but whenever I come to any form of meditation, spiritualness, any of that sort of thing, and it comes to that gratitude, praising bit, my mind just fogs over and I struggle with it so much because it just doesn't come naturally. It doesn't come naturally. I feel like Americans and praising and that sort of thing is like, you guys have the one up on us or almost instantly.
Yeah. And before we, like, I will say this, higher level performers in America, relentlessly hard on themselves though. So they definitely are. So now, I think a lot of them, you're right. Some of them, when they understand the psychology, will go, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, why don't we work on that? And that's part of what I've learned. It has to make sense to somebody. They have to understand that you're not doing that is missing out on an opportunity to drive your brain in a way that makes it more effortlessness, right? If we don't tap into that, and then we're kind of like, blah, or we're kind of like, we're critical. Critical's worse because critical drives up the pain. And when you drive up the pain, it's like, no. And so I have to actually stay on my coaching clients sometimes to go, hey, did you do it? They're like, no, I didn't. I'm like, well, and I will not be the person to add pain. So I'm not going to jump on them, but I'm like, hey, like, let's walk this through again, right? We can do things. There's two models in life, I believe. And right, there's a blend between them. Yes, you can be driven out of pain, but you have to understand that if you do this kind of disappointment in yourself and frustration, you will get your brain to move, but it will be because you're dropping cortisol in the bloodstream and your brain will go, I don't like this. It will look for an association and it will go back to the thing you're doing. And now the problem is you now have fear, which that initial part will drive you, but it'll almost drive you in a way where you go, okay, I won't allow that thing to happen again because I'm not going to quit this thing, but I won't allow it to happen again. So I'll work harder. I'll work harder. I'll push more. So I'm not saying you can't get some results you can't drive yourself from pain, but everything I've learned is you won't enjoy it, number one. Number two, you'll hit your cap because fear is really hard. Fear and anxious is really hard to control. But if we can come to the center, this is what's kind of cool too. I realize if we can come to a single habit and teach ourselves to go, oh man, like what's up? Like this is a step closer to me becoming that person. That's exciting for me. And it's awkward at first, but you just got to try it. And because I always say, it's more awkward? Waiting to jump all over yourself and talk to yourself about how much of a disappointment you are and change your body language and have your shoulders go down, because that's going to lead to some really counterproductive emotional like habits and patterns. But if we can fend that off and we can learn to celebrate, we can get our brain to be driven by pleasure and better emotions. And for me, I look at it and I'm like, why would I not do that? And then it was mind boggling to me because I learned it around meditation. I'm like, oh my gosh, like my brain, I saw it before and it didn't want to keep doing it. I'm watching it now and it literally moves towards it. This is crazy. And then I started to love it, like loved it. And then I was like, oh, could I do this with cold immersion? And then I went through a similar process of working. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that now too. And then it made me realize, what if I did this with parenting? What if I did it with coaching? What if I did it in my life? And the end outcome now is I realize, oh my gosh, like I wake up every day and I do not feel anxiousness. I wake up and my brain feels pulled towards what I do. And it's not some magical formula. I've changed it is a magical formula, but it's not some sprinkle on you. It's something you work. And as I've worked this, I've taken out all of my critical nature. And I go so quickly to growth on things. My brain has learned nothing that I do in my life is a threat. It's all opportunity. Like, listen, I'm going to give my best. If it's not what I want it to be, I won't beat myself up. I'll just look for growth. Then I'll get excited about growth. Then I'll jump back in and do it. And then I'll provide positive feedback. And my brain learns, okay, no threat, only opportunity. We grow no matter what. High level of like pleasure, low level of pain. And it's wild because that's changed my whole life. So it started with habits. And then I realized, wow, what if I took it in my key roles? And then my key roles morphed to I realized I don't have anxiousness on Sundays anymore. If I have 12 coaching calls, I don't think, oh my gosh, I've got 12 coaching calls. I'm like, cool. Chance to go and impact 12 lives. How cool is that? Now, I'm not pretending I arrived at that spot. I did not. It's not I'm not pretending I'm anything that anybody else couldn't be, but I worked at that to make sure that my brain was seeing things the right way. And then I trained it with positive. So it's wild because it's changed things. And then I've watched other coaching clients do that too. And it's really cool to see that.
I do enjoy talking about what is a good life with people. And I do enjoy talking about habits. And I don't talk about habits as much because there's so much out there, but you are the person I want to pick the brains of habits with for a little bit longer.
Okay. Yeah.
So first question, are there any habits that you don't do today, but you would still encourage someone to do if they wanted to live a good life?
That's a good one. I think most of the habits that I believe in, I'm going to give this a second to see if it comes back to me because nothing's coming right off the bat. But I think most of them I've chosen. I think one thing that I have to say for sure is I have adapted and evolving. I will get to where if a habit isn't serving me in a certain way, I'll adjust and adapt it. So I've had to learn how to shift the way I do gratitude. I've had to learn to shift the way I do meditation. So off the top of my head, give me a second. I know there'll be something that I might encourage, but if there's something that's valuable enough for me though, and I think this is what happens when you start by going, why? Why am I doing this? And it's the right habit and you choose it to help you become a version of yourself you want to become. I've never found a cap on meditation where it stopped working. I've needed to adjust. I've needed to find new ways to do it, but it keeps serving me. I know what it does for me. Gratitude's the same, right? And so I've done that. I will say this, I love cold immersion, but I will give myself pockets if I don't feel like it, where I'll just take some breaks from it, or I'll do instead of full immersion, I'll do short cold showers. So I will say I do adjust that in periods. If I ever feel like I'm pushing myself too much, I'll actually stop, draw back, assess, take some days off, really think through why I'm doing it, come back to it the right way. And so I definitely think that is a habit that might fit that mold, but I would have to think more and maybe get back to you on one that I just don't do that I recommend. Because I think my belief would be if I recommend it, I think I would probably come back and try to find a way to do it and evolve at it.
Yeah. No, I was just curious if there was any that you've evolved past almost, that they served you for a while and they're good to start with, but then you can just set them to one side and you don't actually do them anymore. But I mean, proof is in the pudding. If you're still doing them, however many years after you started doing them, then
Yeah.
they're serving purpose.
I don't read as much as I used to, but I don't know that that's a thing that I love. I think I read, but there was a pocket where I went through where I read like 100 books in a year. Like I just wanted to read a lot. I went at doing that. And then there's been, I traditionally 30 minutes. I'm probably closer to like 10 or 15 now. So but I definitely am looking at it. I'm not trying to force myself, but I'm trying to look back and reconnect to why do I do it? Because I think what happens is you read a lot. It sometimes becomes harder to find what you're looking for. There's so much good out there, but sometimes you're finding a repeat of things that you've read. And I think that's challenging for the brain to get it to like want to listen to the same things. Instead, you're looking for like angles of things you're looking for. So the reading is something I need to work at a little bit more, where I think it's incredibly valuable to be reading to the tune of 30 minutes a day. It's changed my life. So I call it redialing. I do have to redial habits from time to time. If I ever sense that my brain is not wanting it, it's time to take a step back, remind myself of the benefits, maybe shift how I'm going about it. Like with meditation, I'll go through pockets where if I'm getting a little bit more stale on my traditional going through, like with my breath, calm in my body, clear my mind, I will shift to like maybe a little bit of visualization to kick off, or I'll listen to different types of like instrumental music that I enjoy to mix it up, or more spiritual music sometimes. So I've learned that from coaching clients. If we think we're going to do something the rest of our lives the same exact way, the brain, unless you're really good at knowing the exact benefits and why you're doing them and intentional, your brain will all of a sudden go, like, I don't know, like it'll kind of get bored with it. So you have to really work with that redial. So that's a big piece I probably definitely have had to do, is work with that.
And do you, with some of the clients that you have, do you come across them and they're just doing nothing? There are no habits in their lives. It's just quite unconscious, let's call it, and it's just they wake up when their alarm goes off and they just check their phone straight away, and then they're straight into their work. And it's like, okay, cool, we've got a lot to do here now.
100%. I kind of have two different types of people, right? I have proactive people who are going it alone a lot, who have learned, who are like, hey, I like the idea of your system. Teach me your system. But I also get a lot of athletes. And athletes are very system-oriented creatures, but it's more to their lifting and sometimes for their eating. It's definitely for developing their skill sets. There's no systems around like the mental nervous system side of things often. It's wild because like psychology is so much of like excelling. But in athletics, a lot of times coaches, they have nothing for it. And that's why they're so intrigued when you bring it up. And so, yeah, I often have people when it comes to this space who don't have anything they're doing. And I don't mind that actually, because it's like fresh slate. Okay, these things that I'm teaching them, I don't have negative that I have to unwind, right? So it's sort of okay. If they've done meditation, like, it just didn't work for me, which isn't really the way meditation works. It's not like it doesn't work for anybody. We just have to go about it the right way. I feel like it's something that will serve anybody if we go about it the right way. We have the right expectations around it. We know what we're doing, because we all have busy minds, right? We all need to have quieter minds. We all have anxiousness. We need to learn to get control of our nervous system. But it is, when I have a new person, it's not bad to me. It's like, well, we can do the psychology, dial it in the right way the first time. I can make sure that they're not getting hard on themselves and crushing themselves and associating more pain with the behavior. And so to me, that's kind of fun when you start with new, but there sometimes is a heavier lift with that. You have to really pour into understanding why we do what we do. But it's no problem when you start with somebody new. It's kind of fun because you got a fresh slate.
Yeah, geez. So, seeing as we're on this, I just need to know. So your morning routine now. So you're still, alarm clock goes off at 5 o'clock.
It varies a little bit. I would say most of the time 5:30 though, like usually by 5:30. And so I also pay very close attention to like my sleep. I want to be with 98% of the time or more. I want to be 7 to 8 hours of sleep, because I just know that like to have optimal, we need to do that. So it can sometimes range to 5:30, but the very first thing I do when I wake up, it's actually, in full transparency, I go to the bathroom first, because I'm not going to meditate before I have, if you've gone the whole night, you use the bathroom, but I come and I sit, and I always like to sit up. I didn't start with this, but kind of cross-legged, hands kind of in front of me where I hold them here, pop headphones on, and I'm going to go through some type of meditation. And that for me is almost always going to be about 20 minutes, unless something airport and it's really early, I'm going to go 20 minutes. And I vary what that is, but that's usually my spot. I will say by the end of my meditation, I definitely want to be calm, centered, clear. If not, I've missed something, right? I've missed an emotional state or something like that. I haven't processed an emotion, because I should end that and be clear, calm, in a good space. I will transition into journaling. And so I have what I call a 3G journaling system. And for me, that involves gratitude, an element of give, and an element of grow. So my gratitude is it's still the 3x1 blessed bank, right? I go through and I go my three top areas. I try to feel gratitude for my role as a parent and a husband, like just feel it as a gift that I've been given. I try to do the same with my coaching. I try to do the same with my energy. There's a faith component that I go through. I do my biggest challenge, but I want to make sure that I'm not mailing it in. Sometimes I close my eyes and I see a picture. A lot of times I'm a speaker, so I talk myself through it. But my key is to feel that gratitude, because I want my brain to go, what I have in front of me is an opportunity. And so I go through that gratitude. I will occasionally make little shifts to that, but I go to the give part. And that's my part where I always tell myself, like, how do I show gratitude for this life that I have, for these gifts? By giving my best. What does that mean? Well, there's specific attributes. I call them like matters most metrics. Some people might call them values, but I go through and I'm like, what matters most to me today? Love. My ability to raise the level of love that I have for my life, but also love. It sounds weird, right? But I want to show love for my clients. Now, I don't tell them like I love you on a daily basis, but that I would hope if you talk to them, they would go, yeah, he cares about us. Like I know he does. Like, because that's a key part, right? If I'm going to work with somebody, I don't want it to be transactional, right? I want it to make sure of that. I want to make sure that I'm showing love with my family for my work. So I start there and I go through other metrics, whether it's like my kind of level of like bliss and joy, my energy. I have these things that I really want to drive and I want to work on in my day. And so I go through those, and sometimes I'll have goals down below I'll go through. But then my third part is growth. Every day I make sure, generally what I'll do is I'll go back to my previous day and I go, what were one to two things that were good? Like I want to teach my brain to look for what's good, especially in those areas of like my energy, my love. How did I do on that? Like, what are the areas? Okay, my effort was really good. I ate the right foods here. I want to point out good to myself. Like, this is good. I'm excited about this. Highest level, I'm proud of this. And then rather than going, oh, I sucked at this and that, I'll go over to the other side. And I call this like a transition technique, right? My second part is like, okay, what are one to two things that I want to improve at? Notice I didn't say, what are one, two things I suck at? What were the mistakes? I go, what are one or two things I want to improve at? And if I had a talk the day before, I might go, first, man, my energy was so good. I'm excited about that. I served, man, I feel good about that. But then I'll go, what do I want to improve? Slide 17. Yeah, there's that one small mistake. No big deal. Let's address it. Or, oh, I need to be a little bit more compact in these areas. That's taught my brain that we will always evaluate by growth. We will always acknowledge our investments. We will always look in a positive way how we want to get better. Because I used to be like the type where I'd go do a talk, right? And I would like 98% of it, knock it out, be so good. And then this will reference, I just said a second ago, one time when a woman came up to me, no, and I don't mean any meanness by that. She just happened to be, she came up and she said, hey, slide 17, you had a mistake on there. And I was like, oh, shoot. Like I was like, and then I felt embarrassed. And then I'm like going to the airport, Denver airport, and I'm replaying that mistake over and over again. And then it finally dawned on me, because my 3P free formula, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm literally have a system where I am associating pain with this thing I want to love. I'm not being fair. I did 98% of this the way I wanted to, 99. There was this one area and all I'm doing is replaying negative, which is what we do. And I went back to my 3P free formula and I'm like, okay, how can I shift this? Well, I want to be about my metrics, right? Which is what the journaling is about. I need to evaluate right. So I would have to, on the back end of talk, stop and go, okay, there's some emotions there. And I had to process those. And I have a specific way I do those. But I would then always, after talk, push myself to go, what went well? And in that instance, I'm like, oh, my energy was so good. My creativity, I served really well. I know I did. And then I was like, well, what I want to do better, instead of going, oh my God, I'm a disappointment. It's ridiculous. This idea of perfection. I just like, oh, we'll just go correct that one slide. Who cares? Like right now, if somebody came up to me and they're like, hey, you were really crappy on this slide. I'd go, oh, okay, thank you. I'll analyze that. And I'm not trying to be mean, but like, I don't want to be over responsive. So that formula though, doing it on a daily basis has taught my brain there's a specific way we're going to go through things. This is my operating system. I call it a 3G operating system. This is how I operate. Not this heavy external, not relying on people's like praise, not over responding when they criticize, very much intentional how I go about things. So that journaling is the second thing I do. And then third is I'll generally read. And that's I'm probably in that 10 to 15 minute range, pick a book that I'm really passionate about, at least like I'm intrigued by, and read and end that way. And then I'll a lot of times I'll work out with my wife after that and get into our day too.
So going back to the very start of that, let's call it a 5 a.m. alarm clock for argument's sake. Does your wife also get up at 5 a.m.?
That's a good question. She does a lot more now. That was not the best situation when I first started because she was not happy with me because we had
Hmm.
young kids and I'm waking up early and she was like, "What are you doing?" She does. Like this morning, she was up. She was a little later than I was, but she's kind of redialing her meditation and going through. She has her journaling. She does, and so we're blessed that way. Like, and we worked at it. Like over time, it was hard because at first I knew it would help her because it helped me, but a relationship's really interesting when you're first starting. It's not easy to go, hey, like your attitude kind of stinks. You should probably do this. That will not lead to great spot. But I kept telling her like, hey, like, you know how like you got like a little bit of that stress, you know how you got these things like the major thing that helped me was like this. This has helped me so much. And then I just had to leave it alone. Sometimes she had to hear it
Hmm.
from her sister or mom and at the beginning, and then she would do it. And then I'd be all, what the heck? Like, why are you listening? And so, but then I learned to get my ego out of the way and just do my best to put it there. I think, I don't know, you'd have to ask her, but I think she probably looked at it and saw the changes like in me. And I think I became a better husband. And when that starts to happen, that's a pretty cool thing. Oh, one thing also, there was a point where she wanted to start working out together and I was quick to jump into that space and do that with her. And so there was an opening, but yeah, she'll wake up most mornings. There's no tension there. She knows what I'm doing. If I get up too early, I can go to a different room, but now it's nice because we do some of that. And our kids will even come in sometimes and join us reading and stuff like that.
It's so. You look at a couple, and then one person goes over to a book and finds it is Robin Sharma's book, isn't it? Is it the five? It's not the 5 a.m. Miracle. Is it just the 5 a.m.
He
Club?
does. He has the. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I know the
Yeah.
book. I've read it. That story book. Yeah.
And one person in the couple picks up the book, reads it, and then they're right. I'm waking up at 5 a.m. now, and the other
Yeah.
person just looking
Yeah.
at it. Are you kidding me? Like it was 7 before, 7:30, and now all of a sudden you've got to get up 2 hours early. So you're going to disturb me at 5 in the
Yep.
morning. What
It
the
was. It wasn't a good fit at the beginning.
And then I was crashing out. I was dying at like 9 p.m. I was starting to get tired, and she's like, "We're just about to watch a movie. What's wrong with
Yes.
you?" It
Yes.
really throws things out.
Yeah, and what's wild now though is it's so different. Like there needed to be an opening because I get this question a lot. They're like, how do you what does your wife do? How do you get like or my husband? How do you get them on one page? And the best thing I can tell them is just like keep encouraging them. There might come a spot like because sometimes husband's wife them giving that advice is like it doesn't for whatever reason at the beginning it doesn't work. But like we had some openings. She started to jump into it, handled it right now. It's like it's wild because we can have like really good communication of like, hey, like I don't you're at it. It sounds crazy, but like you seem like you're off. Like what's going on? Like we can do that, but I think it's because we've invested in so much growth. When we give
Mm.
feedback, it's not personal, right? It's more like, hey, it doesn't seem like you're in the best spot. Like what's going on? Let's talk about it. But I don't think we could have done that if we didn't start with like reading and meditating and so yeah, it's been interesting. But I always say a husband comes to me says, how do I do this? Is there anything at all that your wife would want to do to grow that maybe you might not be fully loving doing, but that you could do? And often it's like, often there can be an area like working out or going on a walk or something. I'm like, go do that. Find the reason to do, like, find the benefit for you, value the connection, jump into that space. Cause like, as I started to, I would always go to the gym and that, but as I started to work out with my wife at home, that was such a cool thing for us. Like it was this thing that she started to grow. She started to get stronger. I got in shape. We still, that's a 8-9 year habit that we do all the time together. We work out probably 5 times a week together. And it's like, we do this hard thing together and it's like a really neat thing. And so if you can find those openings to growth and somebody can start to like find a love of growth, and you have to understand most of us, not all, but in my country, we're coming from a background where growth is equated with education, and education is not a positive thing for most people. It's where they've felt the most vulnerable and like they're not enough. They were forced to read all the time. So like, if you're going to try to get somebody to read, that's sometimes a tall task to come back to. But ultimately, if you can encourage them, let them know the benefits, hopefully get a book in their hand and experience it, then you can create a lot of positive around that.
Mm. And so, are you about an hour in by the time you've woken up, you've meditated, you've done your journaling,
Mm-hmm.
you've exercised? You're about an hour and a half into your morning at that point?
Probably an hour and a half, yeah, with working out. Yeah, and sometimes though, this is a big thing. So like I have my core ritual. I would say don't start with that. That doesn't make sense. I started with parts of reading. Reading was my first part, right? And then I came upon and I learned to love reading, right? Like pick one of the core habits. You're like, this could really serve me. Go at that one. Learn the psychology, the 3P free formula around the habit, around the ritual. Learn to create that pull. And then what you can do is you can expand the habit, or you can move to the other habit, start to work the psychology around it. And so for me, those things probably came over time that I added them. They just started to make sense. I'm like, wow, like this is game changing. Like I want to do this. And I would have one dialed in, like I love it, like reading. And then I would add like journaling. And then that would get dialed in and add meditation. And then I started to mix them in a way that really helped me like show up and be my best. And so I always say, like, you don't want to start with something like that. You want to start with like something that's 10 minutes, something that you look at and go, I could do that. That's reasonable. And 10 minutes, don't misunderstand what 10 minutes can mean. 10 minutes of the right thing can create a radical transformation. I mean, mine was, you start at that initial part, you notice the benefits, it starts to help you grow, you do it right, and then your brain loves growth. My biggest thing now is making sure that I don't keep expanding to the point where my brain's like, this is too much. Or if I've got a tight window in the morning, I don't want to force my brain to wake up at 4 or 4:30 if I don't want to. I'll often do a more compact meditation. I'll do 5 minutes. I'll do my journaling in my head if I'm traveling or something like that. I had to learn to be adaptable, because if you're not adaptable with habits, all of a sudden your brain starts to go, this stinks. I don't like it. And so you have to learn, there's certain things you have to learn to make it towards something they like, but starting small, like BJ Fogg talks about, start small, work the psychology around it, learn to love it, learn to see the benefits, then you can expand that habit or add something else.
And one last one on journaling. Do you prefer to physically write something down with pen and paper, or do you do it on your phone? Or like you said, when you're pushed for time, you do it in your head. But ideally, do you like the physical action of writing things down?
Yeah, I do tend to do that. I'm kind of in an in-between phase. I use this for all my notes in my Remarkable journal. It's like it's a writing one where I store everything. So all my coaching and everything goes into that tablet, and it has a feel like that. And so I use that a lot. I used to have an actual journal that I use. And so that's another thing I probably shift. Like I've used journals heavily in the past, paper. And then I realized I don't like having a lot of like paper around. So I started to use this, and this is really good. I do love shifting it off. I do it probably multiple times a week now. I actually can sometimes at the end of a meditation feel gratitude extremely high level if I don't stop and go to paper. Like if I just keep going and I do my gratitude in my head, like it can mean more to me sometimes. So I definitely want to keep paper like that, but I'm a combination of using the tablet now and probably doing it in my mind.
So one thing that's a big part of what you do is helping people in the key areas of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a way of defining the key areas in lives? Does that make sense? Do you have the set areas that you like to look at that encapsulate an entire life?
Yeah. And it's, I do a lot of work with athletes. So you generally are going to start with an area. An area for them is, one thing is always going to be their sport, right? That's it's going to be high up there. But like for me, there are definitely categories from there that fit. Family's often going to be a part for people, even college age kids. Their school is going to be important to them. That's a big area. And if it's not, that might be career for somebody else. But often areas like your energy, things like that, your faith, those are some common categories. But like, I'm not the person to decide the most important areas. We need to look and say, okay, what are the key areas that you really want to go at the next year that would enhance and allow you to have a great life? Like most of the time it does fit within those categories though. It's like, okay, I have my job, I have my family, I have my energy and vitality. I want to go at those areas. But some people may want to go like, I don't do enough adventure. I want it to be about adventure. Some people may say, man, I want to really work on my exercising or something because they think it would move the needle in their life. Some people, it's like, I just want to work on being more present in a key area of their lives. And so you can vary it. The main thing is what's the area that if you were to go at it, we were to create a vision, we were to create a plan that you could see yourself pouring into, that it would really create a radical change for you. And so logical, like I said, starting point when I'm working with a business professional or an athlete is we go right into those areas, right? Because it's a natural fit. Somebody's hiring you for work. That's fine. Let's go at that. But I believe in creating a template for them. So if we're going to go at an area like wrestling, like a sport like wrestling that I came from, we're going to sit down and we're going to take their top area and we're going to brainstorm vision over the next year. And then eventually we'll go beyond. What would something you'd be extremely excited, extremely proud a year from now that you went out and you made happen? Now, the big thing that I do that may not be crazy common is I like to tell them, I like to use a certain like template where we'll do an overarching goal, but we'll go down below and we'll focus on metrics, mastery metrics. So your composure, your energy, your ability to cut loose, your fearlessness, whatever these areas are that they want to master. And the biggest thing I do is I make sure that we're creating our goals and our metrics around things internally that are wired towards the person they're passionate to become. So I'm okay if part of their goal, they say All-American national champ, but I don't want that to be just it. That leads to a lot of fear, a lot of like disappointment when we're off base. So if they're going to have in their goal All-American, I say, okay, no, but like, let's combine that. Let's have a hybrid goal. What type of wrestler do you want to be? And they might say, man, I want to be like calm and composed and like able to go out and just cut loose and be me every match. And then we might say on our way to becoming an NCAA All-American, our national champ. But I just believe heavily in like, let's make this about internal metrics. Let's start to drive our passion for the person you want to become. Let's do that so well that it will take care of the results. But we need to drive up who you're becoming because it truly is what matters most, number one. But number two, I've never met an athlete, if they only focus externally, where it works super well. There's too much pressure. Pressure is fear. Fear is blood in the limbic part of their brain. Really hard to control. You're probably going to get inconsistent performance. But I've never met an athlete who comes over and goes, this is the athlete I want to be. I want to be more composed. I want to learn to cut loose, and we get the right plan. I've never been one that's afraid of that, because as long as it's based on giving your best and growing, the brain will go, I can give you a best effort every time. And if you're going to grow, I like that. So let's go do that. You get great at your system, it will drive the results. And so, but my point is as we learn that skill set and we start to put it down where they start to learn their metrics, their habits, how to go about them, they've now learned a skill set where we can turn over, and they will do this. My athletes will go, I should probably do this in school, huh? And I'm like, you probably should. This is the exact same thing. If we're trying to teach you to love this wrestling thing and get you to be free and cutting loose entirely, have it not be personal. Instead, we get to growth quickly. Imagine what that would do for your school. If we weren't afraid and we were cutting loose and we were growing like crazy, like it'd be awesome, right? And then all of a sudden they learn, oh, well, man, we can do this in any area of our lives. And that's eventually, as your clients grow, they start to do that. And then you start to learn it's not all that different, right? You often will have similar like metrics in every area of your life. I want to love my job. I want to love my clients. I also want to do the same thing with my family. I want to love what I'm doing for my fitness and vitality. It's like you'll end up arriving at like these universal like metrics that you can focus on that will drive every area. And that's kind of cool because there's a simplicity to that. But yeah, you want to help them find those areas, and then you want to help them create a plan that makes sense so they can thrive in it, and then they can take it and they can build it out.
It sounds like it's bringing in so much stoicism and focus on what you can control, and don't worry about what you can't, because you've got to run your own race. If you've got other people, and if your goal is determined by how someone else performs against you can't control that, and you just road to ruin.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, and that's what athletics is all about. That where do you stand in the rankings? And what we're trying to do is no, like throw that to the side, right? Like let's make this about you being the best that you can be. You can go up and do everything right and dial things in and grow like crazy, be performing the best you can. And maybe you just run in like a once in a lifetime generational talent. That's not failure. You didn't fail. You literally maxed out who you are. And not only should you be proud of that, that's going to help you down the road. Right. And so much of our anxiety and what we have is like, where do I compare to others? Who am I going to let down? And like, instead, what we're trying to teach them, no, let's hone your focus on just you going out, being the best that you can be, grow as much as you can. Let's find out where you land there. But one thing for sure is you're going to find some fulfillment and enjoyment. And I just believe my philosophy is when the brain can learn to really love something, it will gravitate towards it. And you can start to find a flow state. You can start to like really enjoy what you're doing. And I think that's max who we are anyways. But it definitely is that. Like, we can control parts of our lives. And I just believe we can control enough to where you can really enjoy what your life is. And life does throw you some really hard challenges. But I think if you control what you can control, I think you can have a really enjoyable life. And sometimes that's going to be really difficult. But what I learned, and I hope I never lose a wife or a kid or something like that. That's a different level like Viktor Frankl has. But what I've learned is like, listen, you can have hard things happen. Like you lose your job and it feels highly personal, like your whole world's been uprooted. But in the middle of that, if you start to take control of some key things, you can still move forward, feel good about yourself. Because I felt embarrassed when I lost that job. I shouldn't have, though. I worked really hard. I mean, I doubled up on the publications they asked me to do. I got I poured into that job. I look back now and I'm like, hey, like I did the best I could. Now, with what I know now, would I shift my focus? Oh, entirely. But I did the best I could. There's no reason to be like ashamed of that. But sometimes we need to go through that to learn some of those lessons.
And going back to your coaching clients, when they come to you, do you find generally there is a good self-awareness of the areas that they're lacking in? Or do you find you need to tease that out in them? Because often we talk about fear and pain. Often
Yes.
there might be a blind spot in an area that they just don't want to touch. And
Yeah.
they might be aware of it, they might be unconscious of it, but it takes a few conversations and you have to tease it out and go, right, okay, this is actually where
Hmm.
we should be focusing a lot of time, but you don't want to because you know it's going to
Yeah.
bring up some stuff.
Yeah. So I'm sometimes blown away by the level that people roll in and they're like, hey, I've got these issues, this issue, this issue, I need help with it. Some people are they have that awareness, whether it's from family or different things, they can come in and they can tell you that. Some come in and they have no awareness, like none. They're like, no, I'm all good. No, but coach says like you're really struggling before games, your anxiousness. He sees you not being yourself and they don't know that. And so it's like, okay, we have to find a way to move forward. And so you have a balance of those two. But I think if you fast forward, I've never met a human being who has a full understanding of the fear in their body. Never. I didn't know that at all. As I was going through my UNC situation, I lost my job. I now look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, I 5 years in a fear state. I just didn't know it. Like we just often think if we don't have this full blown like panic, we think we're not in fear. But when your mind is running on negative, often that's fear. When we feel uneasy in our body, that's fear. It's there. And that's the thing I learned is for most people, it's there all the time. We call it anxiousness because it just maybe feels better or whatever. I have anxious or anxiety. I tell my athletes, no, that's a fear response. It might be a lower level fear response, but that's a fear response. And the biggest thing I'm teaching athletes, I had a session this morning. I said, we need to go at this. We need you to understand when you're falling into that fear state. And so I have to give them examples and teach on it and tell them how I'm working on it because I'm still working on it. But I challenge them to go, okay, let's dig in. Let's go through, I call it 3 R's, right? Number one, we have to recognize an emotion as quickly as possible. That's the best way to go about it. And I won't go through all this in depth, but if I can get them to outline symptoms, when my mind starts to race, I feel uneasy in my body, my hands get cold, there's all these symptoms. And as they start to realize, they're like, oh, I don't sleep well before events. That's a fear response. If your mind's running all the time and it's, especially if it's negative tendency, it's like, what if this happens? What if that happens? That's the biggest thing I know in my body. When my brain starts to go, what about this? What about that? That's fear. I just never knew it before. And because of that, I would get caught in that. And so we have to teach them symptoms of it, where it comes from, but we can also teach them to be realistic with a pattern like that of going, okay, there's no risk here though. There's no threat. My life is not at risk. I often ask athletes, when's the last time your life was at risk with something in front of you? They're like, I don't know. I don't know that time. And I said, but yet, if we really go down to your symptoms, they're all the time for an exam, for a test, for a practice. Like they're there. They're all the time. And so I'm having to teach how to go through that and how to release that. Because if not, our blood flow, a couple things, blood flows in the wrong part of our brain to be highly creative, to be instinctual at a high level. Number two, that ongoing stress response, we call it, is constant low level fear, dropping inflammation in our bodies. Our immune system's going to be lower. We're going to have more injury, more disease over the long term. It's a concoction. So like, I've never met them and I don't judge because like I'm still gaining an understanding of when my body kicks on like a fear response. Now that I know, I can reset it really quickly and I can live like more balanced and centered. So you got the understanding where some come in right away, they know, but then there's levels. I see this often with athletes. You process a higher level of fear and they're like, I'm good now, but then they're not sleeping still. Their mind's wandering. They're going out and they're hesitating and they're not sure why. Those are all symptoms to me of like a fear response. So I think we have to really work at that. Because I don't think we're taught to have any understanding of what's going on in our bodies and nervous systems.
Doesn't make your job easy, does it?
No. No.
I think you mentioned it. You used an alternative word to values. What do you I can't remember what you said now. It wasn't values. It was, what do you call them?
And it's metrics.
Metrics.
Mastery
Okay.
matters most metrics. And
Matters most metrics. That's it.
Yeah, and so the way I differentiate is like, okay, value. I go top level. What do we value? Those are your key areas of your life. Okay. I value family. I value this sport that I'm doing. The level down is like these mastery metrics or matters most metrics. These are like, okay, like we have this area. We want to be able to thrive in it. what are these metric areas that we can go in, measure, we can create a definition for them, we can go at those things. And so that's the difference. It's like the value are almost like those are the top areas. The metrics are the things we're gonna work at to be great in those areas. And I like to go a level below. If we know like, oh, composure, and we define composure of like, oh, at an optimal level, a year from now, this is what it would look like. I would be calm, my mind clear for every competition. I would, if something bad happens in a match, I would be really quick at like responding and just staying on track. And I'd be quick to go to growth. Well, what we want to do then is go down below and go, okay, what's the habit, the best habit we could work to make that happen? That's where meditation comes into play. That's where meditation and cold immersion combined come into play. And the 3P free formula comes into play is we use that to love our habits that drive our metrics that help us close the gap on the goal in our top areas. So there's like a formula to it, but like, yeah, those metrics is really just like, who do you want to become? Like that would also allow you to thrive in your life.
And on this topic, I find it easy to set, let's call it an intention to be kinder. To be kinder, you meet lots of people in your day. Each time you meet someone, it's an opportunity for kindness. Do you have a practice to remind yourself of that daily? I find that if I don't go through a list in the morning, if I don't write it down, if I don't have a practice, a way of zeroing in on it every single day, I can go days and forget it. Then it turns into a negative. What practice do you use to make that a daily habit where it's not something like working out? Working out is quite tangible. You can you either went to the gym or you didn't. Yeah. But how you live your life, what practice do you use to make those things happen every single day?
Yeah, it's for me, that's the journaling piece, right? When I go through and I'm doing my gratitude and I come down to that give component, it's me dialing in to like, if it was kindness, like really thinking about the kindness I want to have, how I'm going to go about in my day. Like I go through that on a daily basis. And then I also do the growth part, which is like, if I'm going through that area, I like to evaluate those. So, okay, what went well yesterday in terms of like one thing recently was like, I really want to emphasize again, that love, my level of commitment. So as I'm going through, I'm reminding myself on a daily basis, I'm going into these areas. Let's really work at these areas. And then as I'm journaling the next day, I'm reflecting back and I'm going, okay, these last 3 weeks, like what I'm most proud of is like my energy level was really good. My level of care was really good. I'm proud of that. I'm excited about that. What do I want to improve at? I think I could improve my skill sets to do that better in this area. So my journaling is allowing me to like really stay in tune with like the person I want to become. So I'm intentional about that. And then as you journal it, you're way more likely to look into your day and go, okay, I got these calls. Let's really focus on making it about them, serving them, not about me. Like, right. And so then you can go into your calls and be more, and then you can be more intentional. And I do this like, and this is, I don't, at this point, it's just like, I just kind of do it. If I have a really busy day and I get to the end and my energy and that was good, I'll clap, slap the desk and go, man, like, this was such a good day. Like, I'm so proud, like my energy. And it's not like, it's never like, oh, that they told me I was the greatest, which is what I used to respond to. I used to be like, oh, that's awesome. And I would need to guard it. Now it's like, I less attached to that. Instead, I'm like, man, my energy was so good today. Like, I'm really proud. I was caring today. Like I go through that and I make sure that I praise that. And then I'm like, okay, what could I improve? Right there. We could be better at this love thing. We could, create some better strategies for them. And so I think that daily reminder that journaling's always there to pull it back together and just think about the person I want to become. And then growth wise, how am I doing that? How could I do that? So that daily is a big part of like making sure I'm authentic to that.
And do you let that come up organically every single day, or you pre-assign yourself with certain areas that you want to work on? And how do you remind yourself of what you want to work on?
Yeah, it's for me, it's ritual. So it does come in my journaling. It's that second thing I do in my day, but I'll often, every few months, I'll probably spend a few months on things, 2 to 3 months. And as long as I'm feeling an energy towards them and it's something that I know I'm still wanting to work at, it's good. But every once in a while, I think, again, this is a redial situation. I'll start to get a little bit like stale with that. I won't feel that. I'll always look at my sleep schedule. Am I not feeling well? Am I not doing certain things right? But if I'm doing things right and I'm still kind of like, it's like, maybe it's time to start to look at it. It's like, are there other things that might matter to me more now? Maybe it's that I have excelled in that area. My brain's kind of like, okay, like, let's move on to something else. And so you do have to evaluate that. I think it's probably productive to every 2 months, 3 months, take a look and make sure, is this still something I'm passionate to work at? And I might keep 2 add a different one. I did that recently. I had done commitment for a long time, like commitment, show up like to develop your gifts, to do that. And then I realized, like, I don't know, that's not resonating with me as much. And then all of a sudden this idea of like joy in my work did resonate with me. So I was like, joy, like I want to have joy writing. I want to enjoy writing. I want to have joy. And so I started to like really flood my brain with that. So I swapped those out. Doesn't mean I won't use that again, but that was really resonating me more like the person I wanted to be. And then I told myself, like, if I'm more joyful at it, my commitment level is going to be crazy high. Like if I love what I'm doing, my commitment level is going to naturally do that. So sometimes I'll read something too, and I'll go, like I really want to go at that. And I think that was the stem of the joy thing, is I'm like, I'm not feeling that as much. Let's swap that out. So I don't think it's the same for everybody, but I do think you get dialed in on maybe 2, 3, sometimes more things that you want to work on. You flood your brain with it. Brain's really good. If you attach energy to something, like an outcome that you want consistently, the brain will get the message of going, this is important. Let's move at this. And we need that because our phones are going to grab us all day long. But then we can take that and go into our days, work on it. We do then have to make sure that we're providing that feedback through our journaling or something else. Otherwise your brain will go, doesn't really matter. There's nothing really happening here. Versus if we go through and we make an effort towards it, we're like, man, energy was so good. That's exciting. We're moving towards this. The brain can learn, okay, let's keep working at this thing. But yeah, that consistency around your journaling and how you do it is important.
Okay. If I said to you tomorrow, Coyte, you can only take one habit forward with you for the rest of your life, which habit would you pick?
Probably meditation.
Yeah,
probably meditation. And
that's the biggest bang for your buck.
You could probably cheat a little bit and do a little bit of gratitude and meditation. It wouldn't that's meditation. So I could do my I could focus on gratitude and love in my meditation, but that I can't separate like what reading, because reading led me to meditation. And then there's they all have their place. But meditation it definitely has made the biggest difference, because it's just taught me the level of control I can have in my mind and my body, how to find calm. We are often looking outside of ourselves for the answer, but if you'll actually go inward enough and you'll get quiet and calm enough, it's this like beautiful space that's like, it's just more than enough. You can go to that space and just like, gosh, like this is really amazing. And you don't need anything outside of yourself. And within that space, if you're calm enough, like I've also found my best creative ideas comes from that space. And so it would probably be meditation. Just there's a lot you can do in that space, and just the ability to kind of find your center. I don't think I could do it without that habit.
And we've spoken a little bit, well, quite a bit, about the fears and negative self-talk, self-doubt. Are there any strategies that you use or that you encourage your clients to use that we haven't spoken about yet, specifically around the fear aspect?
Yeah. So one thing that I encourage my clients to do is, like, we combine this with meditation, body scan, like a body scan to get to know what's going in your body. And we start by noticing areas where we're tight and learning how to release that. But I often try to teach my clients, like, what's going on in your mind? Is your mind running? Do you feel uneasy in your body? We need to get to know that. We haven't talked about the body scan, but what we want to connect it to, if we get to know the symptoms of fear, and I'll go a little bit more in depth on this, but like on your body scan, if you can recognize fear, what can happen is you can process out of it. Like, this is one of the only things for me. Like, when I'm in my meditation, the only thing now that stops my brain will get busy. It's when I get into an emotional state. That's it. Like, my brain all of a sudden is like, oh my gosh, like we got this thing going on. Oh shoot. And my brain will just go, poof, 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 poof. And I'm trying to like clear my mind. So I'm going, okay, thought, leave it. And all of a sudden my mind, poof, 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 it just keeps throwing those thoughts. And so what I've learned is, okay, body scan, and I'll just do this right off the bat, even to get ahead of it. I'll go through, I'll try to notice if there's any tension. I'll try to notice like any of those symptoms. If I do, I will process right away. Processing an emotion is one of the coolest things that we're not taught to do. We're definitely not taught as like a proactive thing to be your best. If you can recognize fear quickly, what happens when you recognize an emotion, blood flows in the limbic part of your brain, which is going to give you negative. But when you recognize it, studies have shown that blood flow moves to your prefrontal cortex, like immediately. It reallocates blood flow just by going, there's fear. Okay, I notice the symptoms. And so the better we get at that, the more we can move to the second R, which is realistic. And that's the part where we go, like, okay, I know I have fear here, but like, honestly, there's no real threat. There's nothing that's going to hurt me that bad. And it's definitely, this fear definitely doesn't make sense to be my highest potential. Often I'll have athletes go, I'm safe. There's nothing here that's going to hurt me. I'm okay. And that literally then positions it to you to release it. Because then you go to the third R and you go deep breath in, You focus on releasing that, breathing. It sounds crazy. People are like, you can't just release an emotion like that. You unequivocally can. But working those 3 steps, if you can do a body scan and get ahead of it and teach yourself to catch fear, process fear quickly, I think it's what we're supposed to do. I asked, again, I might have mentioned this before, but I asked clients, when's the last time that you've been in a life or death situation? I don't remember. Your brain's responding that way. What we need to do is teach our brain to go, chill. There are no threats here. This is a chance for us to go out and live as well as we possibly can. It's no problem. And so if we can do that early in the day, I do that. And if my mind's busy, I'll go through those 3 R's. By the time I'm done, my mind will quiet out and I'm easily able to fall into my meditation and be calm. And so to me, that's what it is. Body scan, getting to know your body, catching emotions so you can recenter. Because we humans are pretty spectacular when we're centered. We can be creative. We can be proactive. We can think about vision, who we want to be. We're not bogged down. Our body can rest and digest and give us better energy. From that space, I think we can do some pretty cool things. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is the body scan combined with what we talked about before.
So that is all well and good when you're in your lotus position, in your room, everything's done, and you're in that mode. How about if we flip it to just before you went out to give your TED talk, or just before you've got a really big proposal that you need to do, and you can tell you've done your body scans in the past, and you know fear is coming on, and it's natural, and it all makes sense that you should be nervous. If you weren't nervous, you should be nervous, because these are natural responses that should help. In the moment, do you have any tactics that you use to help bring that anxiety down, bring that fear level down to normal, workable levels, so it's not taking over your entire body and entire experience?
Yeah. And so my whole thing is like, we need to have worked these skill sets and know them. So when we get in the moment, it's second nature. We need those neural pathways. So we need to know, I call them our 3 C's of our meditation: controlling our breath, calming our body, clearing our mind. So when we get in that, that can become more second nature, because that's our way of telling our nervous system, we're all right. The way we breathe, our relaxation, our body can start to pull it back. But then it's literally what we just talked about. If athletes are really good at being mindful, they can catch fear as it comes on before it gets to that point. Because usually what happens is the mind will start to go, oh, shoot, what if we let coach down? What if this happens? And that's the starting point. Once the mind starts, or we get close to a situation, it starts to move into it. It rarely goes like straight into it. If you're mindful, you'll catch as it starts to move on. Then we can work those things. And I'll give you an example of this. And so I was on a plane yesterday, and this is a very real fear situation for me. And I was sitting, had my headphones on, I'm watching a movie, and all of a sudden, so my son's sitting to my right. My wife and my daughter are a row over on the inside 2 seats. And all of a sudden, the person next to me shakes me. And I take my headphones on. He says, your daughter. And I look over, and my daughter's going, Dad, help. She's screaming help on the plane. And I look over, and my wife is passed out. It looks like she's dying. Like, honestly, her head's like this. She's not breathing. And I'm like shit. Like, this is like, and so I'm basically going over, and there's just so much going on. I'm trying to calm my daughter. My wife is probably out for close to a minute, like not breathing. And she comes back awake, and and then this is just a situation. I'm trying to get my daughter okay. I'm moving her over by my son. I'm trying to comfort her, and I'm sitting there trying to like help my wife, and my leg is like shaking. They're shaking, right? They're like moving, and I immediately stopped, and I'm like, that's fear. That's fear in my body. And I'm basically working this in real time. I'm like, that's fear. And I'm like, actually a very reasonable response right now. I love this woman. She's my person. I can't imagine not doing life with her. But I stopped, and I'm like, realistically, this is not going to help me serve her or them. I don't want to, I definitely want to move. And so I moved through that. I focused on releasing it. I was like, okay, deep breath in, breathe out, shake out. I noticed the shaking start to stop. Okay. And my brain starts to become better. Now, I couldn't have done that like straight from scratch, but I've worked this. I worked it at my last talk when I felt some. I work it on a daily basis. So when I get into these moments, I work on controlling my breath, and I move through this. I was able to get rid of the shaking and just talk to her about breathing properly, getting to where she's more calm and centered. And I was able to just help her. It was an hour and a half where she was not fantastic. And it ended up, it was all okay. Ended up okay. She's okay. But it was like a very real, about as much as anything that I could have that would cause it. But I watched it change. And so we have to know that, because in that moment, for me to stay in a fear response, I can't help my kids. they're going to be way more panicked. I can't help my wife. I want to be able to show up and do the best that I can. And so I had to work that. And then I had to come on the back end and I had to do it again. I had to, as I was sitting in my meditation this morning, I don't want to carry some of that. Because if you get into heavy fear and you tuck it and you don't deal with it, I may not want to get on a plane with my wife again. My brain may go, nope, how about no? We'll never fly again. And so I actually had to go through and acknowledge just how much shock I had in that moment, like how much fear I had in that moment. And it caused an emotional reaction even this morning. Like I felt like some tears moving in my body. But again, I was able to move through and say, we're okay. Like I do not, this is not something I want to keep. I want to carry. I want to be able to move forward, do the best I can in these situations and release it. So I'll work those skill sets, but you have to know them. So when you get in the moment, you're able to do that. I climb big mountains with my son. And there's times where I get in situations, I'm like, oh shoot, like, I feel this. And as long as I know it's good, we're not at a high level of risk, we're safe. I want to be able to process that because I need to be able to think clear. I need to be able to move forward and execute clear. And I think athletes are the same. We need them to be able to execute. Them staying in fear doesn't serve them. So the combination of like the 3 C's of breath I teach, that's our foundation to get us like pulled back. But ultimately we need to be able to process that in real time, which is not an easy skill set. But like if we work it every single day, if we feel anxious for an exam, for practice, and we start working that, we're basically training our nervous system to go, we're okay. There's no threat here. The worst thing we'll do is like, we'll make a mistake here and that's okay. And we'll grow from it. And if we keep growing from it, we're going to be exceptional at this. So the more we work it, the better it is though.
So it's essential to build that mental robustness ahead of time rather than having some sort of tactic in the moment, because your brain might not be able to function in the moment and recall that breath pattern or whatever you need to get you through it. You need to.
But and so if they've started in meditation where there's no distractions, they're cultivating, just like an athlete who goes in and works their shots and stuff right off the bat. We're not putting them in a live situation right off the bat. Work it there. And then we're going to take you and we're going to drop you into these situations where you have a minor level of like stress and fear for like a assignment or something like that. And we're going to work it there. And we're going to keep building up your skill set. And then as you get good at it, you get really quick at noticing when things shift in your body. If you can get ahead of it and catch an emotion quickly, it won't full on overtake you. That's the coolest thing is if you catch fear and like, that's fear. I know why. And you can do that. You can actually start to walk that fear back and then learn to like let go of that and release that. Never forget, like the fear is there because we've conditioned our nervous system improperly. There's actually not a threat most of the time in front of us. It's an improper response from our nervous system. We just need to stop and go, I think I know why I've been so hard on myself in the past. I've went to disappointment so much. My brain's afraid of this thing because it doesn't want to feel like it's not enough. But you know what? We don't do that anymore, right? We have a new way of doing things. It's time to let go of this fear so we can be who we're meant to be. Like, I just don't believe fear 99.999% of the time is accurate. It's not. And so we're really just trying to be more reasonable, realistic. And so but your nervous system is not just going to walk off if you've had 10 years of like behavior and conditioning from parents and coaches telling you're a disappointment. Like you're going to have to like change the patterns of not going to disappointment. And then you're going to have to let your brain know in real time, we don't need this anymore. I know why you have it, but we don't need it. And we have to, because you have to develop like an assertiveness in this. You can't walk in and be like, I think maybe let go of fear. And your limbic part of your brain's like, no. And you have to walk in and say, fear, I know why, but you know what? Not serving us. Time to move on. And if we don't believe it, like humans have the capability to create change, right? We do. Like, but you have to get good at your skill set and have a power of intention. A fear got built at some point, right? Your brain responded to it. So it makes sense that you'd be able to unwind it with the right approach. And that's another thing Tony Robbins always says, change happens in an instant, right? You get enough pain, all of a sudden, boom, you want to create change. And so for me, it's like, if we can create a fear in an instant, which you can, because athletes will have these hard moments and they don't process them and they carry them. We know they've created in an instant or over a period of time. Why can't we unwind that? And the answer is you can unwind that, but we have to work at that.
And as you've mentioned it, the stresses that we have in our lives today, they're just not accurate and appropriate to how we perceive them and our physiological response to what is actually presented to us. What strategies have you used to, in equal parts, minimize stress, but then maximize happiness? Is it all one and the same strategy, or do you deal with them differently? Like reducing stress is one thing, maximizing happiness is a completely different thing.
I think they're different things, but they work very close together, right? And it kind of connects to what we're talking about. If I have an athlete we want to minimize stress around the thing they're doing, because if not, brain's going to improperly read fear, threat, and it's going to change our whole experience, right? So it's going to lower our experience. So we want to be able to take and do exactly what we said, process it, recognize it, go through realistic, release it. And if we get good at that, then from that space, we can come over to our purpose and our metrics and go, this is who we want to be, right? We want to be this person. And so it's wild. I call this emotional alchemy. I don't know if you've ever read the book Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, but it's journey of this young boy is going to travel. He wants to go on a personal legend. And so he's going to go out on this quest, as you say. And he meets this girl early on, wants to impress her. Dad likes money. He's like, I got to go out and find a way to make money. And so I won't ruin it for everybody, but he wants to find an alchemist. An alchemist is somebody who can take these metals that alone would be considered worthless or not worth much, and take these metals and mix them together and create gold. And this kid's like, I want to learn how to create gold. Well, I read that book and I was thinking about like emotions and patterns. And my first thought was like, why do we want a bunch of money and stuff like that? Well, we want emotional states. And so my first thought was that. And then I thought, well, what if we could just learn to like control our emotional states? Like, what if we could come to the center and learn to mix together these things and take fear and go boom, and take fear and turn it into excitement? Like, how cool would it be if you had those strategies? Well, that's what I've learned the combination of some of these things are. If you're really good at processing an emotion, you create space in your patterns. From that, if you can get really good, you process out fear, you get yourself centered, and all of a sudden you're able to go to your vision and go, this is a person I want to be, and purpose, and then get your brain to move into it. What I've learned is you can get athletes, business professionals to go very quickly once they learn these skill sets, combine them, and go from fear to excitement in a matter of 10 to 15 seconds. Eventually, brain will learn we just go that way. That to me is like an amazing skill set. What if we can take and go from that spot to this spot? That's alchemy. And my athletes especially love this. They're like, man, I want to be an emotional alchemist. Like, right? I want to be able to take fear and turn it into excitement, and then be able to go out and just be me and cut loose. And what I've learned is like any of us can do that, right? If we have anxiousness, we have to work core skill sets. We need to learn how to use our breath and how to process. But man, if we can change the model and say, hey, I just want to go out and give my best in these areas and grow, and then we make that ritualized, eventually what happens is wild. Your whole life then after a while with the right rituals turns into like one that you're excited for. And then you look back and you're like, man, I truly am an emotional alchemist, because like I used to have so much fear. Now I have excitement. Now it's just naturally excitement. And then from there, that's where your journaling comes into play. You start focusing on the person you want to become. Now you can be enthusiastic and excited, and you can control your states, but you have to go about things the right way. So, so I think they're different, but they all come together like one skill set. We're trying to shift away from like looking externally and projecting the wrong way, instead looking internally and thinking about the person they want to become and help them become passionate about that. And when you're doing that, man, you can control your states a lot.
Now, like with most things, there is a Goldilocks zone of you don't want to be too much, you don't want to be too little, you just need to be right in the middle. Is there a concern with the sort of strategies and tactics that you're talking about? Can you go too far with it? Is what I'm trying to get to. Can you be too cold, too emotionless?
Yes.
Can you take the negatives but not the positives from it if you just dive down that rabbit hole far too far and you need to rein yourself back in? Have you ever experienced that? Is that a thing, or am I just making that up?
I think no, I think so, because I often have athletes ask me that. They're like, can I become too robotic? I'm like, yeah, I think you could. Like if you turn off everything and then there's just and you attach to none of the highs or anything, you just become like robotic. And if that's what you want, that's what you want. I believe like developing these skill sets so we can get out of, you're still going to have sadness sometimes. You're still going to get bursts of fear. What I think is we don't need to stay in those things, right? It doesn't make sense to we don't have to grieve for a year. It's not necessary. I know we have these rules, and if I don't want to offend somebody. If you want to, you can. But like my philosophy is, if I lose something, I don't want to grieve for a year. I want to grieve for, at least fully experience that in a short pocket of time, and then learn to move on. Because even with grief, there's something on the other side we could find. Or like fear, you might have it, and that's okay. But like, why would we stay in it if we don't have to? So my philosophy is, why don't we move out of those, and then you can do things like gratitude and find some of those where you enjoy feeling gratitude. Or like, I don't want my athletes to get done with a good performance and be like, no, be proud, but be intentional of what you're proud about. Not because you won, because you showed up and you were your best. Be proud of that. Be proud of the person you're becoming. You can feel joy from that. And so I suppose if you were like only thinking that you'd only feel joy, like that might be too far, too much as well. the truth is a lot of times probably we're operating from a more centered place where we're more calm, we're more clear. And then what we do is we experience some of these different emotions and we might find what's the right fit for us. But I like to experience gratitude on a daily basis, right? I don't need to, I'm not going to feel it all day long. That will get worn out. But like, I like to be able to look at my family and have moments where I'm like, man, this is really neat. I'm so grateful for this. And so I think you can find that appropriate amount. I do believe there's definitely if we don't do anything about the lower, that's where I think depression and that leads to. If we stay too much in fear, we stay too much in sadness, that's where it comes. Now, if we turn everything off and we turn everything off on the high end, now we don't get to experience like joy and gratitude, and that's not great either. So I think we have to find that balance.
What I really like about your approach to everything like this is that the talk of maximizing your potential. And sometimes that can sound, when you see it in the newspaper, you see it in magazines, you see it on TV, it can sound a little bit cheesy and maximize your potential. It just seems out there. But the Greeks have the ancient Greeks, let's say, had this way of looking at it. You have your current self, and then you have your highest version of yourself, and there is naturally a gap. And closing that gap brings you purpose, brings you happiness, brings you so many things that life is all about. And speaking with you now, that has sort of resonated with me, that maximizing your potential is one way to look at it, but it's really just putting out the best person you can be and making your life purpose, closing the gap, minimizing that gap, getting yourself to that perfect person, because no one's perfect. Everyone's finding themselves where they are currently and trying to get to that next step. And closing that gap is just such a cool thing to wake up in the morning, and that's your mission for the day. Just close that gap. Be one step closer to that highest version of yourself.
Yeah, no, you've described it like really well. And I often think this, I'm like, we humans sometimes are so obsessed with like what we can build externally to prove. And it's like, if you actually stop, look around at this world. You were just in Africa. Like this world is it's extraordinary, really. When you look around, there's so much that's incredible. We're sometimes so obsessed with the external. We sometimes forget to stop and enjoy what's around us. But number two, to like actually show up and think like, what if I brought the best that I could bring to this world? Like, how could that make things better for other people? And to me, that's what really excites me now is like, who could I become through this journey? What could I learn? How could I impact people? And that since I've went to that spot is like so much more rewarding. But like, and it's not everything's, oh, well, this is you're just like this feel good thing. It is a feel good. It is a meaningful, purposeful thing to be moving towards your highest potential. But don't miss what it is. And this is not the reason I do it. You can become exceptionally good at something, like in your zone, where you can make such an incredible difference if you're passionate about growing every single day, right? It's not like this fanatical, like, oh, I have to do this and I have to no, like I choose to get up and today I want to improve who I am. Like I want to get better today. It's a passion thing, and it's a really cool thing. So that's the thing that we sometimes we don't realize is this really unique, neat thing that we can do. And I know I've thought about this. When I get to the end of my life, like I went to a funeral recently, the trophies that I won and we read this. And so it's a again, bulletin board, but like the trophies in that aren't going to matter. They won't. But I do believe like the level of love and the way you've shared, the impact you've made, like those things will matter. And I think you'll really believe in those things. So I don't know. I've thought about this a lot. And nobody has to buy in. Everybody can do their thing their own way, but I feel really good about showing up and just trying to be my best on a daily basis and seeing where that takes me, and knowing when my time comes, I can feel good about knowing that I tried. I tried to live this life as well as I could.
That's such a nice place to end it on. Coyte, I want to be really respectful of your time because this last hour and 45 has gone so quickly. Yeah. I do have the quick fire round, which as your name would suggest, won't take too long. Was there anything else? Well, firstly, thank you so much for your time today. It's been incredible. I can't wait to start editing this and putting bits together. Was there anything else that we haven't got to or haven't spoken about that you thought would come up that you'd like to share?
I don't think so, man. I don't think I've ever been on a podcast that's covered like quite as much as you have. And so I think we've moved through a lot of the things I'm most passionate about. I think maybe one other thing we didn't touch on is just making sure that when you do your values too, like don't just focus only on the area of work or something where you get attention, like spend the same amount of energy and intention in your role as a parent and a husband or whatever it is. Like that's super important to me as well. I work really hard at those areas too. And if I didn't have that, like I wouldn't feel good about taking and pouring into my work if I was invading all that space. That, and I think making time to like for nature and recharging, that would be something that I would say. We think we have to go all the time. And it's extremely valuable to take time. And this is what meditation, being in nature, to just recharge, to let your brain rest. Some of your best ideas will come if you just create pockets to let yourself rest, recharge, and just take a break from your day to day of what you're doing.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, quick fire round. Which book? I used to say which book, podcast, or blog, and it made the answer way too long, so I'm going to cut it down. What book would you give someone if you wanted them to live a good life?
I think so maybe I'll give two here for two different reasons. I don't want to break your rules, but number one is I think if it's somebody who's just starting, who wants to like find more purpose, I go to The Alchemist. Like, let's start with something that's lighter, easier, like a read where they can just be inspired about going, hey, like I think I want to do some different things in my life. That's a really cool book for that. I think one that is more challenging that I've read, it's a long book that I've read multiple times, is Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within. Okay. I sometimes am blown away that book is like 30 plus years old and he was able to write it then. Like, it's kind of crazy, just the psychology and understanding around behaviors. So that would be one that I definitely would add for somebody who's maybe further along, a little bit further along in their journey, that wants to dig in and make some big changes. Tony's, I think, brilliant at what he does. And that's a book that's probably made a pretty big impact on me.
Brilliant. What was your biggest light bulb moment where you learned something about yourself?
Oh, shoot. Man, that's tough. Like you're gonna, I would say light bulb moment, one of the most impactful in a meditation. I was learning about all this processing emotions, and there was a meditation where I still don't know why, but my brain took me back to the UNC situation. And I don't know why, I went through this process of where I instead of like pushing down, I started to acknowledge like what I was going through. And it was like a very like kind of almost like an emotional experience. But in that meditation, I was like, I just decided like, I don't want to carry this. I want to let go of it. And it became this like, I afterwards felt lighter. And then I realized like I had less fears of stuff in my life. It was a light bulb moment for me where I was like, oh my gosh, like I can create change here. I don't have to stay in these emotions. I can process these things. And so that was a light bulb moment when I realized like I could actually process out and not stay in these. I can take away the emotional pain from past things and not have the lingering effects of that. That was a pretty like powerful moment.
And sorry, when you say UNC, was that when you lost your job?
North Carolina. Yeah. When I lost my job
right,
for 10 years. Yeah. And I just had tucked it down. And so that was a moment where I went back and my brain literally took me to the time where I was in front of my boss and I just stopped and I was like, I thought about what I felt, embarrassment, anger, and it was just like, whew, like emotions. And I didn't tuck them. Like I just let them come out. And just that combined with like the release part, that's what's led me to those 3 hours today, as I realized like, and then I started to go back to all of my memories that were hard and just started to process out like breakups and everything. And that healing was like crazy, but I just didn't realize you could do that until that moment.
That's so interesting. The moment that you talked about a month into meditation, where there's a meditation teacher that I'm working with called Jason Linney from Monkey Mind Meditation, and he describes it as you fall out of time and space. And that's just how he described it. And it sounded, you used definitely different words, but it sounded like you reached that point. I think Naval Ravikant describes it as your mind reaching inbox zero. And it takes time, and you have to dedicate time daily to it. But there will be a point where you get to that point and there's nothing else to process, and you've processed it all, and it's in a peace, tranquility, whatever we want to call it. Mm-hmm. And I'm jealous I haven't got there yet. I need to double down.
It's crazy. And I don't know, it made me realize I don't have to carry all this stuff from the past. Like you are capable of letting go of it. And by letting go of it, it changes like how you operate in the current. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to carry that. And so it was super cool.
Mm. Of all the skills you've learned or developed, which one do you consider to be the most important?
Processing emotions, hands down. Like for me to be able to, anytime I go to anger, irritation, to be able to like process out of that and replace it, that's emotional alchemy. To be able to replace it with like patience instead of impatience, or to replace fear with like excitement, like that to me has been game changing. The ability when I go through something that's hard to not get caught in sadness or anger and instead be able to move on quickly, change everything, because it means I can operate more in a space I want to operate in.
So there's something you mentioned earlier, actually, just to dwell on this point for a second. you said that you needed to put your ego to one side. And that's
Mhm.
one area that I massively struggle in with getting out of my own way. I
Mhm.
know the right thing to do. I know the right thing to say. I know the right thing to think, but I just can't get out of my own way. I can't put my ego to one side. How do you do that? How do you find that? Have you found that in the past where you know the right thing to do in in a given
Yeah.
situation,
Yeah.
but your ego, it just won't let you do it, and you just say the wrong thing, and you're just like kicking yourself. You know you're
Mhm.
being petty. You know you're being small, but you just
Yeah.
can't get around that thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And I think that it's this, what's helped me is the same thing I just told you about. Like, say,
Mm.
I used to get on like social media and I would see like a post from somebody who does the same work as me, and my immediate reaction was jealousy. Boom, like I feel it in my body. There's a need to want to tear it down. Oh, he's not that good at this or anything like that. What really helped me is when I started to like do this thing. I started to go, jealousy. Why? I've been taught to compare with people my whole life. That's just how I've been taught. But then I'd go to the realistic part and go, realistically, this isn't who I want to be. Like, I don't want to be a person who's jealous. I want to be a person who lifts people up. Like, that's just the highest level who I want to be. And I would learn to, like, again, go through those 3 R's, release it, and then go, what would somebody do who, like, I aspire to be? They'd be encouraging right now. So I don't even know if it was fully authentic in that moment, but I'd get in the comments. I'd say, man, like, really good job. It's awesome. Like, and then I would celebrate, like, go, cool, like, what's up? Like, that's a really good job. Like, that is who we want to be. So I learned to break patterns down. When we call it ego, really at the core of ego, I bet there's an emotion that's running, like a fear of not being enough, or there's something usually that's running that causes us to make a decision. So for me, what was game? I knew who I wanted to be. I had to stop when I was feeling like not enough or fear or something, and I had to break down the emotional pattern. Once I broke down the emotional pattern, what I've learned, it's not all that difficult to go, all right, what would somebody do in this situation that I want to be? Well, they would do this. Once we've broken down the pattern, it's much easier to do that. So that biggest advice I would do is, okay, if there's situations that involve ego, what are you feeling in your body? Is it a feeling of not enough? Is it a feeling of jealousy? Like, what is it? Because once what you process out of the emotion, our highest self isn't that. That's what you find in meditation. When we're centered, we're not egotistical. In fact, we're probably more loving. We're more caring. Like, that's who we are at our core. Patterns are what are causing us. Comparison, this idea of who we need to be, fear that we're not that. Like, that's what causes a lot of it. So that's just my belief. There may be different philosophies, but that's what I think. If you can figure out that pattern and break it down, it'll become much easier.
So keeping this internal rather than somehow weirdly comparing yourself to someone else, you could ask yourself, what would my higher self do in this situation?
Mhm.
And you know what that is. It's the same thing like, what would Jesus do? What would Muhammad, Buddha, whoever? It's the same question, really.
Yeah.
It's the same answer. Sorry, the answer would be the same. And you know the right thing to do. And then at least if you follow through and you actually do it, you can praise yourself and pat yourself on the back and go, yeah, I did the highest self version of that
Mhm.
thing. And
Yeah.
obviously it turned out better than the stupid response that I
Yeah.
was naturally going to do without any contemplation. I like that.
Yeah.
What's been your best mistake?
Um, I would say, only because of what I've learned about it, maybe the best mistake, and this is, I don't know, this is a bigger thing, but like, just, I used to make the mistake of looking way too much externally. And I think because I looked too much externally, I arrived at pain in my life. And that allowed me to kind of look at it and learn from it and become a better version of myself. Like, right. So, I mean, there's, because I could often, I've made mistakes my whole life, but a lot of it, when I realized like it was the external, the mistake I made was that. And I don't, like, I'm not proud of that, but I'm also not like discouraged by it. But by making that, I was put in a spot to learn from it so I could actually come to the center and learn a better way of doing things. And so maybe that was a mistake that I made where all of a sudden it put me in a position, because usually when we make a mistake, we're put into a position to go like, that's not so great. And I think that was one, when I learned that it was the wrong way of doing things, I was able to do something about it. Right. And that was a really, like, probably profound thing for me.
Hmm. If someone wanted to take one step to become closer to living a good life, what one step would you tell that person to do?
Whew, you asked some hard questions. I think I've talked a lot about a lot of different things. I would say pick a single habit of something we've talked about today or something that you've researched that could change your life and change the way you go about it, right? Take the 3P free formula, toy around with it, try to make it something positive tied towards you being your highest version of yourself. Praise yourself for that. Eliminate, like, just work that process around a habit that you believe in and just see what happens in your life. Because I could say do it with meditation, but like maybe that's not the right starting point. Maybe it should be, maybe somebody else likes the idea of gratitude that's listening. Maybe somebody likes reading, but take one of those things where you invest in yourself, invest the right way, and get the positive psychology right, and just see what happens.
Brilliant. Who in your life should we talk to if we want to live a good life?
I think I've already mentioned, like I said, listening to Tony Robbins and his psychology is great. If I had one person in my field, that's probably who I've learned the most from, is him. I also had a coach named Ron when I was growing up. He's passed now, so you can't talk to him, but man, that was a guy who changed my life as well.
Coyte, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I say this every single time, but I mean it every single time. I cannot wait to start editing this down and listen to this back again. It's the best part of my job, is to do the first re-listen through and start editing it, and it's just so pleasurable, because the things that we're talking about that don't sink home as we're talking about them, if that makes sense, I go back and listen to them, and then so many pennies drop, so many things I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. Like, do you know what I mean? It is just the best part of the cool. The whole process for me is fantastic. If people want to reach out to you, get your book, etc., where is the best place to find you? What is the best resources to find? And if they want to connect with you, how do people do that?
Yeah, the nice thing about having a name like Coyte Cooper is I don't think there's another one on the planet. So as long as you don't mess up make it Coyote, you should be fine. It says Coyte, Cooper, Cooper. You can find me on my website, coytecooper.com. Find me on social media. You can reach out that way. So really easy, because of my name, easy to find me. And then you can find the books on Amazon, just searching my name as well.
And just out of interest for my own thing, are you working on any new books at the moment? Do you have, what is your next major project that you're...
I do. Yeah. It's called Free Up. And the book is essentially many of the things we're talking about today in a concise form, where people can go about doing these things in a manner that allows them to free up their highest personal, their performance, personal wellness, and potential. So that's what I'm working hard on right now. That's basically what my coaching system is. So I'm excited over the next year. I'll be bringing that out, and it'll by far be probably the neatest thing I've ever worked on.
Amazing. I can't wait. When it comes out, let me know, and we'll, hook up again.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Coyte, thank you very much.
You bet, man. Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Just before you scroll on, please do give it a like, and if you're new around here, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Cheers.